The air in the house felt thick with unspoken words and the weight of our secret. I, Sophia, found myself standing at the kitchen sink, washing dishes with a mechanical precision that belied the turmoil inside me. The clink of china was the only sound, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged outside just nights before. Ethan entered the room, his presence like a magnet pulling my attention away from the mundane task. He leaned against the counter, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "I've been thinking," he started, his voice low, almost a whisper, "about what happened." I paused, my hands submerged in soapy water, my heart racing. "Ethan, we shouldn't." "I know," he cut in, his gaze dropping to the floor before lifting back to meet mine. "But it's not something we can just unhappen." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I turned off the faucet, the silence now complete. "What do you want from me?" My voice was barely audible, a mix of fear and longing. He stepped closer, the space between us charged with electricity. "I want to know if you feel the same way I do. If us, is something you want." The question hung in the air, a challenge, an invitation, a confession. I looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not just the man he had become but the boy I had watched grow up. The lines were blurred now, not just by the dim light of the kitchen but by our actions. I don't know," I admitted, my voice trembling. "It's not just about what we want. There's Richard, there's your father, there's us," Ethan interjected, his hand reaching out, hesitating before touching mine. His touch was like a spark, igniting something deep within me that I had tried to suppress. I pulled my hand away, the soap suds dripping back into the sink. "Ethan, this is dangerous," I whispered, my voice barely carrying over the hum of the refrigerator. He nodded, his eyes dark with a mix of desire and regret. "I know. But sometimes, Sophia, the most dangerous things are the ones we want the most." I turned back to the sink, my hands trembling as I resumed washing the dishes, each plate a barrier between us. "We need to think about what this means, what it could do to your father, to our family." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Richard it made my heart ache. I've thought about it. I've thought about it every second since that night. But when I look at you, all I see is us." The word "us" echoed in the quiet kitchen, a promise and a threat. I could feel the pull, the undeniable chemistry that had been simmering under the surface since his return. "Ethan, we can't just decide on a whim. There are consequences." He moved closer, his breath warm against my ear. "I'm not asking for a decision now. I'm asking you to acknowledge what's between us, to not pretend it doesn't exist." My resolve wavered as his words sank in. The truth was, I felt it too, this magnetic pull towards him, a connection that felt both exhilarating and forbidden. "I need time," I said, my voice firm despite the turmoil inside. "Time to think, to understand what this could mean for all of us." Ethan stepped back, giving me space, but his gaze remained locked on mine. "I'll give you time, Sophia. But know that I'm not going anywhere." "I can't." The tension between us didn't dissipate, it only grew, like a storm cloud gathering strength. I finished the dishes in silence, each piece of cutlery a reminder of the normalcy we were supposed to maintain. But as I dried my hands, I knew that normalcy was slipping away, replaced by something much more complex and fraught with peril. Later that evening, as I sat alone in the study, the weight of our conversation pressed down on me. The room was filled with Richard's presence, his books, his desk, his life. I felt like an intruder in my own home, caught between the life I had built and the one I was dangerously close to tearing down. The sound of Ethan's guitar strumming softly from his room drifted through the walls, a haunting melody that seemed to echo my inner conflict. I closed my eyes, letting the music wash over me, each note a reminder of the choices I would soon have to make. The melody was beautiful, but it was also a siren's call, pulling me towards a future I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The next morning, the house was unusually quiet, the usual bustle of breakfast preparations absent. I moved through the rooms, each step echoing in the emptiness, feeling as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the next move in this silent chess game of emotions. Richard had called, his voice cheerful through the phone, oblivious to the storm brewing at home. He mentioned he'd be staying another night due to a last-minute meeting, his words a mix of apology and excitement about a new business deal. I assured him everything was fine, my voice steady, but inside, my heart was a tumult of guilt and confusion. Ethan was already gone by the time I came downstairs, his absence a palpable void. I found a note on the kitchen table, his handwriting bold and decisive, gone for a walk. Need to clear my head. E. The simplicity of the message belied the complexity of our situation. I spent the day in a haze, the house feeling both too large and too small. Every room held memories, now tainted with the shadow of our indiscretion. I tried to distract myself with chores, but each task seemed to bring me back to Ethan, to the touch of his hand, the warmth of his breath. By late afternoon, Ethan returned, his cheeks flushed from the cold, his eyes avoiding mine. He mumbled something about needing to work on his thesis, retreating to his room. The distance he put between us was as much a statement as his earlier words had been. Dinner was a silent affair, just me and the echo of our earlier conversation. I picked at my food, the flavors dulled by the weight of my thoughts. The sound of Ethan's guitar started up again, this time with a different tune, slower, more contemplative. It was as if he was speaking through the strings, expressing what words could not. I couldn't bear the isolation of my thoughts any longer. I knocked softly on his door, the music pausing abruptly. "Can I come in?" My voice was tentative, almost a whisper. He opened the door, his expression guarded. "Sure," he said, stepping back to let me enter. The room was a stark contrast to the rest of the house, filled with books, papers, and the faint scent of his cologne. I sat on the edge of his bed, the space between us charged with the same electricity as before, yet now it felt different, heavier with the weight of our reality. "I've been thinking," I started, echoing his words from the kitchen, "about what you said. About us." Ethan sat beside me, not too close, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body. "And?" His voice was soft, almost hopeful. "I can't ignore what's happening between us, Ethan. But I also can't ignore what it would do to your father, to our family." My hands twisted in my lap, a nervous habit I thought I had outgrown. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I know. I've been thinking about that too. It's not just about us, Sophia. It's about everyone involved." The silence stretched, filled only by the ticking of the clock on his desk. "What do we do then?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Maybe we need to step back, see if this is just a fleeting thing or something more." The suggestion was both a relief and a pang of loss. "A step back," I repeated, testing the words. "But how do we do that when every time I see you, I feel this pull?" He reached out, his hand hovering near mine before pulling back. "We try. We focus on other things. I'll dive into my work, and you keep being the Sophia everyone knows and loves." The idea of compartmentalizing our feelings felt like trying to contain a wildfire with a garden hose, but I nodded. "Okay. We try." As I stood to leave, Ethan caught my hand, his touch sending a shiver up my arm. "Sophia, if this doesn't fade, then we'll have to make some hard choices." I looked back at him, his face a mix of resolve and longing. "I know," I whispered, pulling my hand away gently. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." Leaving his room, I felt the weight of our decision settle over me like a heavy cloak. The house seemed to sigh, the walls no longer holding their breath but mourning the potential loss of what once was. As I walked back to the study, the guitar resumed its mournful tune, a soundtrack to the uncertainty that now defined our lives. The days that followed were a blur of forced normalcy. Richard returned home, his presence filling the house with a sense of routine that felt both comforting and suffocating. I watched him, his every gesture, his laughter, his touch, all now tinged with a sense of betrayal. Ethan, true to his word, buried himself in his work, his guitar silent, his presence in the house like a ghost, there but not there. One evening, Richard planned a small dinner party, inviting colleagues and their spouses. The house was alive with the clatter of preparation, the scent of cooking, and the low hum of conversation. I played my part, the perfect hostess, my smile fixed, my movements precise. Ethan, too, was there, his role as the charming son, engaging with guests, but his eyes would occasionally meet mine, a silent conversation passing between us. As the night wore on, the wine flowed freely, loosening tongues and inhibitions. I found myself in the kitchen, refilling a tray of hors d'oeuvres when Ethan entered. The room felt smaller, the noise from the party a distant echo. "Sophia," he said, his voice low, "we need to talk." I glanced towards the door, ensuring we were alone. "Now?" "Here." He nodded, his expression serious. "It's important." I set the tray down, my heart pounding. "What is it?" Ethan took a deep breath, his eyes searching mine. "I've been offered a job, an internship in New York. It's a big opportunity, but... My voice was a whisper, fear and hope mingling within me. "But I can't leave without knowing where we stand. I need to know if there's a future for us, or if I should walk away for good." The weight of his words hit me like a physical blow. "Ethan, this isn't the time or place." "I know," he interrupted, stepping closer, his voice urgent. "But when will it be? Every moment we delay, we're lying to everyone, including ourselves." I looked away, the guilt overwhelming. "I love Richard, Ethan. But what I feel for you, it's not something I can just turn off." He reached out, his hand brushing mine, the contact electric. "Then we need to decide. I can't stay here, living this lie. If there's nothing between us, I'll go, and we'll never speak of this again. But if there is..." His words hung in the air, a challenge, a plea. I felt the pull, the same magnetic force that had drawn us together from the start. "Ethan, if we do this, if we acknowledge this, it could destroy everything." The room seemed to shrink around us, the walls pressing in with the gravity of our situation. I could hear the muffled laughter and clinking glasses from the party, a stark contrast to the heavy silence between Ethan and me. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a reminder of the precarious balance we were trying to maintain. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice barely escaping my lips, "this isn't just about us. It's about Richard, about your father. It's about the life we've all built here." He looked at me, his eyes intense, filled with a mix of pain and determination. "I know, Sophia. But I can't keep pretending that what we feel isn't real. I need to know if there's a chance for us, or if I should walk away for good." The air was thick with the scent of our shared guilt and the unspoken desire that had been simmering beneath the surface. I took a step back, needing space to think, to breathe. "You're asking me to choose between my husband and whatever this is between us. That's not fair." "It's not about fairness, Sophia. It's about honesty. About not living a lie." His voice was firm, yet there was a tremor of vulnerability. I turned away, my gaze catching on the reflection in the kitchen window, where I could see the outline of our figures, so close yet worlds apart. "If we do this, if we decide there's something worth exploring, it will hurt Richard. It will change everything." Ethan moved closer, his presence a warm shadow at my back. "I know. And I've thought about that every day. But isn't it worse to continue this charade? To deny what's between us?" The truth of his words stung. I had been living in a bubble of my own making, trying to compartmentalize my feelings, to keep them from spilling over and destroying the life I had with Richard. But now, with Ethan's ultimatum, the bubble was bursting. I turned to face him, my resolve hardening. "If we do this, Ethan, it's not just an affair. It's a decision to potentially end my marriage, to alter the course of our lives. Are you prepared for that?" He nodded, his expression solemn. "I am. But are you?" The question hung between us, heavy and laden with implications. I looked into his eyes, seeing not just the man before me but the future we might have, the chaos it would bring. I need to think, Ethan. I need to really think about what this means. He stepped back, giving me the space I needed, yet his gaze never left mine. I'll be in New York for a week. I'll give you that time to decide, but when I come back, I need an answer. The weight of his words settled over me like a shroud. I watched him leave the kitchen, his figure disappearing into the crowd of the party, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the remnants of our conversation. The clinking of glasses and the laughter from the other room seemed to mock the gravity of our situation. The days following the dinner party were a blur of introspection and avoidance. Ethan kept his distance, his presence in the house a silent reminder of the ultimatum he had given me. Richard, ever the attentive husband, noticed my distraction but attributed it to the stress of hosting. I found myself wandering through the house, each room a testament to the life I had built with Richard. The study, with its shelves of books and the faint scent of his cologne, was a sanctuary I now felt like an intruder in. The living room, where Ethan and I had first given in to our desires, now felt like a crime scene, every piece of furniture a silent witness to our betrayal. One morning, as I stood in the kitchen, the sunlight filtering through the windows, I realized I couldn't keep living in this limbo. The decision was mine to make, and it was time to face it head-on. I picked up my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed Ethan's number. "Ethan, it's Sophia," I said when he answered, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "We need to talk. Can you come home?" He agreed, his voice neutral, giving nothing away. The wait for his return was agonizing. Each tick of the clock was a reminder of the life I was about to potentially upend. When he walked through the door, the air between us was charged, not with the electricity of desire, but with the heavy burden of choice. We sat in the living room, the same place where our indiscretions began, now a stage for our final act. "I've thought about what you said," I began, my voice low, "about New York, about us." Ethan watched me, his expression unreadable, waiting for my verdict. "I love Richard, Ethan. I've built a life with him, a life I cherish. But," I paused, the word hanging in the air, "I can't deny what's between us. It's real, and it's powerful." He leaned forward, his eyes searching mine. "So what does that mean for us, Sophia?" I took a deep breath, the decision crystallizing in my mind. "It means I need to be honest with Richard. I owe him that much. And I owe it to myself, to us, to see where this could lead." Ethan's face softened, relief and apprehension mingling. "Are you sure?" "I'm not sure about anything anymore," I admitted, "but I know I can't keep living this lie. If we're to explore this, it has to be with full transparency." The conversation was cut short by the sound of Richard's car pulling into the driveway. My heart raced, the moment of truth imminent. Ethan stood, his hand brushing mine in a fleeting touch of solidarity. "I'll be in New York," he said softly. "Take the time you need. I'll wait for your call." With that, he left, his departure a silent promise of what could be. Richard entered, his smile warm, his presence filling the room with a sense of normalcy that felt like a facade. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing the tension in my posture. I nodded, my decision firming. "Yes, just some things to sort out. Can we talk later? There's something important I need to discuss." Richard agreed, his concern evident but trusting. As he walked away, I felt the weight of my impending confession. The house, once a symbol of our shared life, now felt like a stage set for a drama I had unwittingly written. Later that evening, after dinner, I sat Richard down in the study. The room was dim, the only light coming from the desk lamp, casting long shadows that seemed to echo my inner turmoil. "Richard," I began, my voice steady but my heart pounding, "there's something you need to know." He looked at me, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "What is it, Sophia?" I took his hands in mine, feeling the warmth, the familiarity, and the love that had once been enough. "I've been struggling with feelings for someone else. It's Ethan." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's face went through a gamut of emotions: shock, hurt, betrayal. He pulled his hands away, standing abruptly. How long? His voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of his world collapsing. It's recent, but it's real, I said, the truth spilling out. I need to understand these feelings, to be honest with you and with myself. Richard paced, his mind racing, his life unraveling before him. And what about us? What about our marriage? I don't know, I confessed, tears welling up. But I can't continue without addressing this. I need to see where this leads, with your knowledge. He stopped, looking at me, the man he loved, now a stranger in some ways. If you go down this path, Sophia, there's no coming back. Not to what we had. I nodded, the finality of his words hitting me like a wave. I understand. I'm not asking for forgiveness now, but for understanding. For time. Richard sat back down, his face a mask of pain. I need time too, Sophia. Time to process this. We sat in silence, the weight of our shared history and the uncertainty of our future hanging between us. The decision was made, not just for me, but for all of us. The path forward was unclear, fraught with potential pain and loss, but it was the path of honesty, of facing the truth of our desires and the consequences they bore. As I left the study, the house felt different, not just a home but a battleground of emotions. I knew that whatever happened next, life would never be the same. But in choosing honesty, I had chosen a chance at something real, something that might either heal or destroy us. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.